A single sheet of cream paper sits centered on 11 feet of black glass, squared to the edge as if measured there on purpose, and for a long moment, it is the only bright thing in the room. 40 floors down, the city keeps its late shift going. A siren fading into wet asphalt. A saxophone leaking out of a bar none of the men on this floor will ever enter. Up here, there is only the low hum of the building settling into its bones, and a man standing so still he could be mistaken for furniture, reading 4 sentences he already knows by heart on the second pass. Rosa Mckay's handwriting slants right, hurried. The R of her signature dragged long, as though she almost stopped herself, and then didn't. Theo Simpson has buried 3 centuries of goodbyes with less trouble than this single page gives him. He does not put it down. He reads it a third time, searching the loops and slants for something the words refuse to say, and finds only what is written. A date, a notice period she has no intention of honoring, and a closing line so polite it could cut glass. He is not a man who chases things. Things come to him, or they do not come at all, and for 185 years that arrangement has suited him perfectly. He folds the letter along its original crease, slides it into his breast pocket like a blade sheathed rather than a page put away, and walks toward the elevator with the unhurried, terrible calm of a predator who has just remembered he is hungry. Ravenscourt Trust occupies the top 11 floors of a building it half owns, and wholly loves, a 19th century stone shell wearing a crown of new glass that Theo commissioned. And Rosa, over 8 months, has been quietly, stubbornly restoring back toward its bones, sanding false modernity off cornices, arguing the contractors out of vinyl and back into oak, treating a 140-year-old building like it still has feelings to hurt. He noticed her for that first. The way she touched load-bearing walls like they were old men who deserved to be spoken to gently. He did not expect to keep noticing. Boardrooms know him as a wall in a suit, a voice that does not rise because it has never needed to, a man who ends negotiations by going quiet and letting the silence do the cutting. Competitors have learned, at considerable cost, that his patience is not weakness dressed up in manners. It is simply a much longer clock than theirs. 3 separate hostile takeovers have broken against him this decade alone, and all 3 men who attempted them now avoid the restaurants he is known to frequent. He built that reputation on purpose, decades ago, back when men still settled disputes with pistols at dawn, and he discovered that a well-timed silence did the same work with none of the mess. It has served him since. It served him last spring, when a rival heritage fund tried to buy the block out from under Ravenscourt, and found, 3 weeks later, that every permit they needed had somehow developed an inexplicable delay. It served him 2 winters ago, in a room full of men who thought they understood leverage until he explained, without raising his voice once, exactly how little of it they had. He is efficient. He is patient in the specific way that only a very old, very careful predator can afford to be. He has never once, in a century and a half of boardrooms, felt the need to hurry. None of that survives the elevator ride to the 9th floor, where the architecture team keeps its lights on past 9 and its music low, and where Theo Simpson, who has watched empires rot from the inside and helped several of them along, has spent 8 months finding excuses to stand in doorways a beat too long, watching a woman in scuffed boots argue affectionately with a stone lintel. It started, if he is honest with himself, on her 2nd week, when she caught him staring at a demolition order for the original oak banister and informed him, without checking his title first, without the deference the rest of the floor pays him by instinct, that whoever approved that order had the aesthetic sensibilities of a parking garage. He had approved it. He rescinded it within the hour and told no one why. By her 2nd month, he had learned the particular scrape of her boots on the stairwell, distinct from every other set of footsteps in the building, and had stopped pretending to himself that this was architectural interest. By her 6th month, he had caught himself, twice, standing outside her office at midnight for no reason he could defend to anyone, watching her sleep sitting up over a set of drawings, and had made himself leave both times without waking her, because some hungers are better fed slowly, or not admitted to at all. The floor is empty when he steps out of it. Not the kind of empty that means gone. The kind that means recently left, still ringing with someone's presence. A desk lamp burning low over rolled drawings, a mug gone cold, a jacket slung over a chair like its owner meant to come straight back. He finds her coat first. Then, through the glass wall of the corner office that used to be a storage room before she made it hers, he finds her, folding the last blueprint into a tube with the particular violence of someone trying not to cry while doing something ordinary with her hands. He should announce himself. 3 centuries of manners agree on this point unanimously. Instead, he stands in the doorway a moment longer than manners allow, cataloging her the way he has been quietly cataloging her for months. The pencil shoved through her hair like it grew there. The ink stain on her 3rd finger she has clearly given up scrubbing at. The small, furious economy of her movements when she is trying to leave a room before the room notices she's upset. You're leaving before your notice period. His voice doesn't rise. It never does. She doesn't jump. He'll give her that later, privately, as a point in her favor. She goes very still instead, the tube of drawings gripped like a weapon she hasn't decided whether to use. You read it already. Not a question. She sets the tube down with more care than the moment deserves. I gave it to Constance to put on your desk. I didn't think you'd get to it before I was gone. I make a point of reading things quickly when they concern me. It's a resignation letter, not a merger. It concerns me. She looks at him then. Really looks, the way she used to before the last month made her careful about it. And something moves behind her eyes that he recognizes because he has been the one causing it and pretending not to know. Exhaustion, not of the body. The particular kind that comes from wanting something you've decided you're not allowed to have, and having to be professional about it 8 hours a day. You've been a good boss, Mr. Simpson. The formality lands between them like a closed door. I just need a change. You call me Mr. Simpson when you're angry at me. You call me Theo the rest of the time, when you forget you're supposed to be careful. No cruelty in it at all, which somehow makes it worse. Which one is this? This is me being professional on my way out. Your resignation letter has a coffee ring on it. For one unguarded second, her mouth almost betrays her, the corner of it twitching upward before she wrestles it flat again. And it is the single most human thing he has witnessed in a decade of watching people perform certainty they do not feel. I wrote it at 11 at night, in a building where the coffee machine on this floor has been broken since March. You'd know that if you ever came down here before everyone left. I come down here more than you think. That's not as comforting as you seem to think it is. Despite herself, despite the coat already half over one shoulder, and the evening she had planned to spend anywhere but in this conversation, something in her softens toward amusement. You say things like that with a completely straight face. I come down here more than you think. Who talks like that? You sound like you learned English out of a very serious book. I learned English. The particular gravity of a man laying down a fact rather than a joke. Out of several very serious books, over a considerable period of time, and I would ask you not to hold that against me. Noted. For the file. That lands somewhere he didn't intend to aim. She goes quiet, and he watches her decide not to ask what he means by it. Watches her physically set the question down like it's too heavy to carry into whatever conversation this is turning into. He has spent 185 years learning to read the small deaths people choose not to have out loud, and hers is written plainly enough that he could recite it back to her if he thought it would help. It would not help. He has learned that too. Reconsider. A different tack, offered plainly. I'll authorize whatever you need. Leave. A different floor. A different project. Name it. I don't want a different floor. The words come out before she's decided to let them, and he watches her hear herself say it. Watches the flush climb her throat with the particular horror of a person who has just told the truth by accident. I want... She stops. Starts again, flatter, safer. It's not the job. The job is the best one I've had. That's not the problem. Then what is the problem? She looks at him for a long moment, weighing something, and he has the strange sensation, rare for a man who has generally known exactly what is coming for a very long time, of not knowing which way this will fall. You. Finally, simply, without drama, the way people confess things they've stopped having the energy to dress up. You're the problem, Theo. I look forward to Monday mornings because you might walk past my office. I've started timing my lunch to when you take yours. I am 27 years old and I have a crush on my boss like I'm in a corporate drama. And it's humiliating, and the healthy, adult, sensible thing to do is remove myself from the situation before it costs me my dignity along with my composure. So, that's the problem. Are we done being honest, or would you like more? The building keeps humming. Somewhere below them, a security guard makes his rounds, oblivious, human, ordinary. Theo Simpson, who once watched the fog roll off the Thames from a rented room he could no longer afford to leave in daylight, who has watched 3 separate centuries decide love was a luxury for people with time to waste, discovers that he has in fact been holding his breath, a habit he thought he'd shed along with the need to breathe at all. I would like more. Theo, I did not walk down here to talk you out of a resignation. He steps into the office properly now, and something in the way he moves, too smooth, too economical, a stillness that resolves into motion without any visible effort between the two states, makes the hair on her arms lift before her mind catches up to why. I walked down here because I found a letter on my desk that said you were leaving, and my first thought, before any thought about staffing or the restoration schedule, was that I could not let you leave the building without seeing you tonight. That is not the reaction of a man concerned about a resignation. Then what is it the reaction of? He is close enough now that she has to tip her head back to hold his eyes. And later, much later, when she has better words for it, she will describe this moment as the first time she understood that his stillness was not calm. It was containment. It was a man built along different lines than everyone else in this building, holding himself to a very human scale by considerable, constant effort, and choosing, in this exact moment, to let a little of that effort go. Stay, and I will show you. She doesn't answer. For a moment, she doesn't need to. The office has gone very quiet around them. The ordinary hum of the building's late-night systems, suddenly conspicuous by how loud its absence is, and something in the room feels braced, as if the air itself is waiting for permission to move again. Then the lights along the corridor behind him gutter, not flicker, gutter. All 6 sconces dimming in a wave that moves toward them like something walking the hallway on soft feet, and Theo's head turns before the second sconce dies, turns with a speed that blurs at the edges, too fast for the body of a man to move and still look, when he faces her again, entirely composed. His hand finds the tube of drawings on her desk and sets it gently out of the way, as if some part of him has already decided this room is about to need the space. And beneath the calm of his voice, when it comes, there is a coldness she has never once heard from him in 8 months of Monday mornings. Get your coat. Nothing gentle left in his voice at all. Now. The elevator down is 9 floors of silence with teeth in it. Theo stands with one hand braced against the door frame, not touching her, watching the floor numbers fall, 876, with the fixed attention of a man counting down to something he is trying very hard not to arrive at too fast. Rosa's coat is half-buttoned, wrong buttons in wrong holes, because he handed it to her already moving, and her hands were still catching up to the rest of her. You want to tell me, to the doors, rather than to him, what just happened up there? Not here. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have that keeps you safe while I give it. His eyes stay on the numbers. Something in his jaw has set itself into a line she hasn't seen before. Not in 8 months. Not once. The boardroom stillness gone somewhere else entirely, replaced by a readiness that makes the elevator car feel smaller than its dimensions. I am asking you to trust a man you were, 10 minutes ago, planning never to speak to again. I am aware of how that sounds. The lobby is empty at this hour. Marble and brass and one bored security guard who straightens when he sees Theo, and does not straighten further when he sees Rosa, because the guard has apparently learned at some point in his employment not to ask questions about who leaves this building with Mr. Simpson after midnight. Theo doesn't slow for the front doors. A car is already at the curb. Not called, not radioed. Simply there, engine running. A driver who pulls away from the curb the instant the second door shuts, as though he'd been told to expect exactly this and exactly now. Who called him? Rosa says. No one called him. Then how? Dorian has been managing my household for 40 years. He has learned to anticipate the nights that end like this one. Theo says it the way a man might mention the weather, and it is the first sentence since the elevator that sounds like him again. Some of the strangeness folding back beneath the familiar, dry precision of his voice. You'll meet him shortly. I would ask you to be patient with his manners. He finds you alarming. I haven't said a word to him. You don't need to. He finds the idea of you alarming, which is a separate and, in his experience, more reliable metric. The car climbs through a part of the city Rosa has driven past 100 times without knowing what sat above it. A converted warehouse district gone quietly, expensively vertical. One building rising apart from its neighbors with the unbothered confidence of something built to outlast the block around it. The elevator here is keyed, unmarked, and opens directly into the penthouse rather than a hallway, so that the doors part and the whole apartment simply happens to her at once. Floor-to-ceiling glass on 3 sides, the city laid out below like something spilled and left to glitter. A fireplace lit, though no one has been home to light it. And a silence so complete it takes her a moment to understand it isn't empty. It's occupied by absolute stillness, which is a different thing entirely. Sir. A man stands near the fireplace, hands folded, in the posture of someone who has been waiting without appearing to wait, which is its own kind of skill. He is perhaps 60 by the look of him, silver at the temples, dressed with the exact understated correctness of someone who has decided, decades ago, precisely how he intends to be perceived, and has never once revised the decision. His eyes go to Rosa and stay there a beat too long, cataloging, before returning to Theo with an expression that is not quite alarm and not quite disapproval, and is, in fact, both. I take it the situation on the 9th floor did not resolve itself favorably. It resolved. Whether favorably remains to be seen. Theo's hand finds the small of Rosa's back, not quite touching, a guiding warmth an inch from contact. Rosa. This is Dorian Ashcroft. Dorian has been with me since before either of us would like to admit to in front of company. Dorian, this is Rosa Mckay. I'm aware of who Miss Mckay is. Dorian's voice carries the particular courtesy of a man delivering a mild rebuke inside a compliment. You've mentioned her, extensively, for 8 months. I confess I expected the introduction to happen under circumstances that did not involve fleeing your own building at speed. The circumstances were not my first choice. They rarely are, with you. Dorian inclines his head toward Rosa, and something in the gesture is almost courtly, a habit worn smooth by a very long time practicing it. Miss Mckay, for what it's worth, I am glad to finally put a face to 8 months of a man rearranging his entire schedule around your lunch hour and pretending it was a coincidence. Dorian, I said it was worth something. I did not say it was worth staying quiet about. But he is already moving toward the kitchen, unhurried, the small domestic sound of a kettle being filled somehow more reassuring than anything either of them has said, and over his shoulder, without turning. There's tea, if you'd like it, Miss Mckay. I find it helps. It rarely explains anything, but it gives the hand something honest to do while the rest of the conversation happens. She almost laughs. The sound catches somewhere in her throat and comes out smaller, more surprised than amused. But it's there, the first unguarded thing since the 9th floor. Is he always like this? He is always exactly like this. It's one of the few constants I've been able to rely on. Theo guides her toward the seating near the fire, and for a moment, in the firelight, some of the strangeness of the last 20 minutes recedes into something almost domestic. A man showing a woman into his home, a kettle filling in the next room. The ordinary choreography of a night that has, underneath it, stopped being ordinary at all. She doesn't sit. Theo, I watched the lights die in a straight line down a hallway like something was walking toward us. I watched you turn your head faster than a person turns their head. You've been standing 3 feet away from me for 8 months, and I never once heard you breathe when you weren't talking, and I told myself I was imagining it, because the alternative was... She stops herself, presses her palm flat against her sternum like she can hold the rest of the sentence in by force. I need you to just say it, whatever it is. I would rather have the true version than the kind one. Dorian, from the kitchen, does not look up from the kettle, but something in the set of his shoulders says he is listening to every word and has decided tactfully that this particular conversation does not require his participation. Theo is quiet long enough that she almost repeats herself. When he finally speaks, he does it standing very still, the firelight catching the white of his hair and doing nothing at all to age the face beneath it. And his voice has none of the boardroom flatness left in it, only something older, careful, and unmistakably afraid. I was born in 1841, in a city that no longer looks anything like the place I remember it being. The words come the way another man might confess a debt. I have not aged a single day since 1871. I do not eat food for nourishment, though I've become fond enough of the ritual that I still sit down to dinner most nights, for Dorian's sake as much as my own. I do not see my reflection change. I have not stood in direct sunlight in 155 years, and the speed you saw in that hallway is not a trick of the light. It is what I am. The fire pops. Somewhere in the kitchen, the kettle begins, very softly, to sing. Say the word, Rosa says. Her voice has gone very quiet, very steady, the particular steadiness of someone standing at the exact center of a fact too large to feel yet. I need to hear you say the actual word, or I'm going to spend the rest of tonight convincing myself I misunderstood you. Theo Simpson, 185 years old, feared across 3 continents of finance, unaccustomed in a century and a half to feeling anything as undignified as fear. Looks at her the way a man looks at a door he has waited a very long time to open, and finally, quietly, opens it. Vampire. The word you're looking for is vampire. The word sits in the room longer than any word has a right to sit anywhere. Rosa doesn't scream, doesn't step back, doesn't do any of the things she might have predicted for herself, if anyone had ever asked her to predict this. She simply stands very still, the way a person stands when the floor has been confirmed solid, but the house around it has just been revealed to have rooms she never knew existed. Her hand finds the back of the nearest chair, not to steady her body so much as to give her mind somewhere to put its hands. Okay. Just that, finally. Then again, testing the shape of it. Okay. That's it? Okay? I don't have a better word yet. Give me a minute and I might find one. She sits, at last, because her legs have apparently decided the conversation has earned it, and looks up at him with an expression he cannot entirely read. Not fear, not quite, though fear is somewhere in the mixture. Mostly it looks like arithmetic. Like a woman quietly re-adding 8 months of small, unexplained things, and watching them all, one by one, resolve into a sum that finally balances. The building never has cameras working right around your office. You've never once eaten anything in front of me that I actually watched you swallow. You knew Constance had a miscarriage before she told anyone, and when I asked how, you said you'd heard it in her voice, which I thought was strange but sweet. And now I'm realizing you probably heard her heartbeat change through 2 closed doors. I heard her crying in the stairwell. I am not in the habit of listening to heartbeats uninvited. Something almost wry moves at the corner of his mouth, brief as a struck match. Though I understand why you'd assume the worst of me tonight, given the circumstances. Dorian returns from the kitchen with a tray, 2 cups, a small pot, the domestic ordinariness of it almost absurd against what has just been said in the room, and sets it down without comment, though his eyes move over Rosa once, carefully, the way a man checks a bridge before deciding it will bear weight. For what it's worth, Miss Mckay, pouring with a steadiness that suggests he has done this exact thing, in this exact room, during this exact kind of conversation, more than once before. The sky has not fallen. I've served this family since I was younger than you are now. My grandmother served Theo's father before him, and her mother served the household before that, 3 generations back, in a country he no longer has any legal claim to, and one he still calls home when he thinks no one's listening. We are not, any of us, in the habit of coming to harm because of what he is. If anything, the opposite. He is, infuriatingly, the most careful man I have ever worked for. His father was human, long dead, a story for another night if he's willing to tell it, which is not guaranteed even after 40 years of asking. Dorian sets the second cup in front of her with the small, precise click of porcelain finding its exact place. Drink your tea. You've had a long night, and there is, I suspect, a longer one still ahead of it. Theo's head turns toward him at that. Sharp, precise, a question asked without words. And Dorian holds his gaze steadily, the two of them communicating something in the space of a look that Rosa can't decode but can absolutely feel, the way you feel a door close in another room of a house you don't yet know the layout of. What does that mean? Longer night ahead of it. It means, Theo says slowly, choosing the words the way a man chooses footing on ice, that what happened on the 9th floor was not an accident, and it was not the last time it will happen tonight. There is someone who wants very much to know that I have taken an interest in a human woman, and wants me to understand, in whatever way causes the most damage, exactly what that interest will cost you both. Someone. You mean a person. I mean a very old grievance wearing a very expensive suit. His hand closes briefly, once, around the arm of the chair beside hers, and when he releases it, there are 4 faint indentations left in the wood, gone as quickly as they appeared beneath the sweep of his palm. I had hoped to have more time before this became necessary. I don't have it. So instead of the version of tonight where I court you slowly, the way I'd planned to, over months, the way you deserved, you're going to get the version where I tell you everything at once, because the alternative is you walking into something blind, and I have buried enough people I failed to warn in time. Dorian quietly refills a cup no one has touched, and does not look up. Somewhere below the wall of glass, the city goes on with its ordinary late business, unaware, indifferent, entirely human, and Rosa understands, watching Theo's face in the firelight, watching the careful, terrible restraint of a man deciding how much of his fear to let her see, that whatever comes next is not going to happen on the 9th floor of a nice building with a broken coffee machine. It's already on its way here. 4 days pass the way, ordinary days pass for everyone else, which is the strangest part. The coffee machine on the 9th floor gets fixed on a Tuesday, a small miracle nobody questions. Constance leaves 3 sticky notes on Rosa's monitor with increasingly aggressive handwriting. We are talking about this. Then why did you unquit then, on Thursday? Simply a drawing of a question mark so large it takes up the whole square of paper. I didn't unquit, Rosa tells her, over the kind of lunch that has become their Thursday habit. A bench outside the building with 2 sandwiches from the cart on the corner. I reconsidered. You handed a man a resignation letter on a Tuesday night, and by Wednesday morning you were back at your desk looking like someone who'd seen a ghost. Except happy about it, which is somehow worse. Constance narrows her eyes over her sandwich. Did he give you a raise? No. Did he say something? A few things. Rosa. I can't. It comes out more honest than she means it to, and she watches Constance clock the honesty and, mercifully, let it go. Not because she isn't curious, but because 8 years of friendship has taught her exactly which of Rosa's silences are the kind that get pushed through, and which are the kind that get respected. I promise I'll tell you when I can tell you everything. Right now I can't even tell you half of it without sounding insane. That is an extremely ominous thing to say to your best friend, and then continue eating a sandwich like it's nothing. The sandwich helps. Constance studies her for a long moment, the particular scrutiny of someone who has known you long enough to read weather in your face before you've admitted there's a storm coming. Are you safe? Finally quieter, all the teasing gone out of it. Not, is he good to you? I can see he's good to you. It's written all over you like a bad tan line. I mean, are you safe? The question lands somewhere Rosa isn't prepared for, and she takes a moment longer than she means to before responding. I think so. I hope so. It's the truest thing she can offer without the whole story attached to it. And Constance, to her enormous credit, takes it, nods once, and changes the subject to something about the third-floor printer instead, which is its own kind of gift. It becomes, over those 4 days, its own kind of rhythm. Mornings that look exactly like they used to. Meetings and drawings and the particular satisfaction of watching a 100-year-old cornice come back from beneath 40 years of bad paint. And evenings that belong to a version of the city Rosa didn't know existed a week ago. Theo doesn't come to the office after dark anymore. Dorian's doing, she suspects, some quiet recalibration of risk she isn't told the details of, but he is outside her apartment most nights by 10, not knocking, simply there when she opens the door, as though he'd walked the distance from his own life to hers and arrived exactly on time, without needing to be asked how. You could use the buzzer, she tells him, the second night, holding the door open. Like a person. I could. He steps past her into the small, warm clutter of her apartment. Books stacked 2 deep on every surface. A drafting table taking up a third of the living room. The particular chaos of someone who has more ideas than storage. And looks around it the way he looks at everything. Slowly, like he's cataloging it for later. I find the buzzer somewhat undignified. You fled your own building at inhuman speed 4 days ago. I don't think dignity is really the hill you want to plant a flag on. That was a crisis. This is a Wednesday. Something almost like a smile tugs at his mouth. The dry, careful humor of a man who has clearly had 4 days to get used to the idea that she teases him and has decided, against considerable historical precedent, that he likes it. I have standards, Miss Mckay, even in the face of my own mortality's complete absence. That's not a real thing you can say. I just said it. She learns him in pieces, the way you learn a city by walking it rather than reading a map of it. Not the tidy chronological account she half expected, but fragments offered when they're ready to be offered, out of order, honest in a way that feels more true for being unpolished. He tells her, on the second night, that he doesn't sleep so much as rest, that the difference matters more to him than it sounds like it should. He tells her, on the third, sitting on the floor of her apartment because her only good chair is buried under drawings, that he has outlived 4 languages he once spoke fluently and 1 country that no longer exists on any map, and that the strangest part of being what he is isn't the blood or the strength, or any of the things stories make into spectacle. It's the outliving. Everyone. Every single time, without exception, for 155 years. Doesn't that make this... She gestures between them, unable to finish the sentence cleanly. A bad idea. Objectively. Almost certainly. No flinching from it, which she has come to understand is very much his way. He does not soften hard truths. He simply delivers them gently, which is a different and, she is discovering, more effective kind of kindness. I have loved exactly once before you, over a very long life. Specifically because I understood the cost and did not think I could survive paying it twice. I am telling you this so you understand what it means that I am here anyway. It is not a small thing, for me, to be sitting on your floor risking it again." He is quiet for a moment after that, turning something private over behind his eyes, and when he continues, his voice has gone somewhere further away. The particular distance of a man visiting a room in his own memory he doesn't often unlock. She did not die of anything dramatic. No villain, no ritual, no tragedy worth the name. She simply grew old, the way humans are meant to, and I did not. And I spent the better part of 40 years learning how to sit beside someone I loved while she changed, and I stayed exactly the same. And then, I spent considerably longer than that afterward deciding I would never again ask anyone to let me watch it happen twice. That decision held for a long time. It is, I will admit, not holding especially well this week. She doesn't ask the name. Not yet. It sits between them, unspoken. A door she can see the outline of, but hasn't decided to open. Some instinct telling her that whatever's behind it deserves more than a Wednesday night to be handled properly. Instead, she pulls him toward a drawing that's been leaning against the wall for 3 weeks because she can never find the level, and watches him drive the nail in with his thumb rather than search for a hammer, and laughs. Really laughs. For the first time since the letter, at the look of genuine confusion on his face when she tells him that's not actually how normal people hang things. It's hung. Entirely reasonable about it. It is, by any measure, hanging. You used your finger as a hammer. I used the tool available to me. I fail to see the scandal. The scandal is that you've apparently forgotten how humans do basic household tasks somewhere in the last 155 years. I have not forgotten. I have simply stopped seeing the appeal of the slower method when a faster one is available. But he's watching her laugh with an expression that has nothing dry left in it at all. Something unguarded, almost startled, like a man rediscovering a sound he thought he'd have to live the rest of his very long life without. That same night, once the laughing has settled into something quieter, she works through the questions she's been collecting all week, the ones that felt too small to interrupt anything with. Does sunlight actually hurt, or just show? Does he age at all, even slowly? Is there anything true in any of the stories she grew up half believing? He goes through them one by one, patient in a way that suggests he's fielded worse questions from worse company, dismantling most of it with the same dry precision he brings to everything. Garlic, apparently, is simply unpleasant. The way it's unpleasant for anyone with a sense of smell better than average. Crosses and holy water do nothing at all. A discovery made by accident and found, at the time, extremely disappointing. Mirrors show him exactly what they show everyone else, which he has come, over the decades, to consider the single cruelest detail of the entire arrangement, since it means he has had 155 years to watch a face that will never once earn the changes it should have earned by now. What does hurt, then, if not the sun outright? Prolonged exposure. It doesn't burn me the way it burns in stories. I don't catch fire on a rooftop for dramatic effect. But it exhausts something in me faster than the day should be able to, the way a fever exhausts a human body. An hour is uncomfortable. A full day, unshielded, would put me on my knees by evening and keep me there for longer than I'd like to admit. Clinical about it, an old fact recited without much feeling left in it. Silver slows healing rather than poisoning it outright, which is inconvenient rather than fatal in most circumstances. And before you ask, because I can see you deciding whether it's rude to ask, yes, I could compel a human mind if I wished to. I have never once done it to you, and I give you my word I never will. I find the practice repugnant. A man who has to steal consent was never owed it in the first place. It is on the 4th night, on her narrow balcony, with the city humming 12 floors below, and a bottle of wine he doesn't drink but insists on opening for her anyway, that he finally kisses her, unhurried, careful, one hand cradling her jaw like something he's afraid of breaking, despite every piece of evidence to the contrary, and she feels, for the length of it, entirely and only human, in the particular way that only someone standing next to something ancient can make you feel new. I have wanted to do that, against her temple, when it ends, since approximately your second week of employment, when you told me my banister order had the aesthetic sensibilities of a parking garage. That's a very specific moment to fall for someone. You were right about the banister. I have found competence extraordinarily difficult to resist for 185 years. You simply happen to also be the first person in several decades to be competent in my direction, rather than around it. She's still smiling about that, still turning it over, still deciding whether to be flattered or faintly insulted, when she catches, out of the corner of her eye, a shape across the street that shouldn't hold her attention, and does. A man in a pale coat, standing beneath the awning of the closed bakery on the corner, not moving, not checking a phone, not doing any of the small, restless things people do while they wait for something. He is simply standing, facing her building, patient as weather. When she looks again, deliberately this time, he is gone. And she tells herself, for exactly as long as it takes to walk back inside, that it was nothing. A man waiting for a car, a stranger with nowhere better to be. It is only when she goes to lock the balcony door behind them that she notices, on the small table by the door where she keeps her keys, a single black rose lying across the bowl that wasn't there when she left for work that morning, its stem cut with surgical precision. No card, no note, no explanation at all except the fact of it. Sitting in her apartment, 12 floors up, door locked, exactly where someone would have to have stood to leave it. Theo goes very still beside her. The particular, total stillness she now knows to be afraid of, rather than reassured by. And when he speaks, all the warmth of the last 4 nights has gone out of his voice entirely. Don't touch it, Rosa. Step back from the table, now. No. Rosa doesn't move from the table, one hand still an inch from the bowl, close enough that Theo's whole body has gone taut with the effort of not physically pulling her back. I'm not running out of my own apartment because of a flower. I've spent 4 days learning that you outlive languages and countries, and I still don't know the one thing that's apparently important enough to leave black roses over. So no, we're not leaving. You're going to tell me. Rosa, you told me everything else. The sun, the silver, the mind tricks you promised you'd never use on me. You told me all of it standing on my balcony like it cost you nothing. And then a flower shows up and suddenly you can't get a full sentence out. That's not nothing to me. That's the one door you've kept shut. And I think whoever left this wants that door open a lot more than either of us do. So I would rather hear it from you than find out the hard way. That's not as comforting as you seem to think it is. She almost smiles at her own echo of the words from 4 nights ago, delivered so differently now, gravity where there used to be teasing. I don't want the version where you protect me from the story instead of telling it, Theo. I've had enough men in my life who thought protecting me and deciding things for me were the same skill. Don't be one of those, tonight of all nights. Understood. Something in his expression softens despite everything. Small, involuntary. The particular helpless fondness of a man who has just been told off by exactly the kind of woman he apparently can't help falling for. For what it's worth, I find your refusal to be managed one of the more alarming things about you. Dorian will be thrilled to hear it confirmed. Focus. Yes, of course. He looks for a long moment like a man doing arithmetic he has been avoiding for 150 years and has just run out of ways to postpone. When he finally sits, not on the floor this time, but on the very edge of her couch, spine straight, hands folded the way a man folds his hands when he needs somewhere to put them that isn't around a throat. Something in the set of his shoulders has already conceded the argument. Her name was Isolde. The words come the way a stone finally gives way after a very long pressure, and the name sits in the small warm room like it's been waiting 130 years for permission to be spoken again. I met her in 1893, in a city I won't name because the city doesn't matter and never did. She was clever in a way the century had no particular use for, and she loved me anyway, in full knowledge of what I was, which was rarer then than you might imagine, given how little most people believed in anything they couldn't put a price on. You asked her to be like you. I offered, repeatedly, over 11 years, with what I believed at the time was admirable patience. She refused every time, and her reasons never changed. She wanted a full human life, start to end, with all its indignities intact, and she considered eternity a kind of theft rather than a gift. I disagreed with her for a decade. I never once tried to talk her out of the decision itself, only hoped she might change her mind on her own terms. She never did. His hands tightened briefly around each other, the only visible sign of the cost of any of this. She had a younger brother, Ignatius. The name lands in the room and does something to the air, a small drop in temperature that has nothing to do with the balcony door. He worshipped her, Theo continues. He was 19 when I met him, and he had built his entire understanding of the world around his sister's approval, the way some men do. She was mother and compass and best friend to him, all at once, their parents having died young. When she began to age and he didn't understand why she wasn't aging beside a man who so clearly wasn't, I told him the truth, because I was tired of lying to a boy who loved her as fiercely as I did. He begged me, when she grew sick at the end, to turn her without her consent, to save her the only way I could, whether or not she'd asked for saving. And you didn't. I did not. The words come out very level, very careful, the practiced flatness of a man who has explained this exact refusal to himself 10,000 times across 10,000 nights and has never once found a version of it that doesn't cost him something to say aloud. She had told me, clearly, repeatedly, for 11 years, precisely what she wanted. To override that at the very end, when she couldn't fight me on it, when I could have simply taken the choice from her while she was too weak to refuse, would have made her death mine to write instead of hers. I loved her too much to steal the ending she'd chosen, even knowing what it would cost the boy who loved her differently than I did. She died in 1904, in her own bed, holding my hand and her brother's, at peace with it in a way I have spent every year since trying and failing to be. Rosa's hand has found the edge of the table, without her quite deciding to put it there, steadying herself against a story that isn't hers, and somehow already feels like it is. And Ignatius never forgave you. Ignatius never forgave me. He decided, in the years after her death, that my restraint had been cowardice dressed up as love, that I had let her die because some part of me was relieved not to spend eternity managing a wife who would always, in some sense, outrank my judgment with her own. It is not true. I have never once believed it was true. But grief doesn't need to be accurate to become permanent, and he had 40 years to let his version calcify into something he could build a life around instead of a loss. Theo's eyes go distant, the particular distance of a man watching a decades-long fuse burn in his memory. He found someone willing to turn him, eventually. Not out of love, but out of hunger for the kind of power that might one day let him make me answer for what he believes I took from him. He has spent the better part of a century becoming very good at being patient about it. That's who's out there, the man from the bakery. Theo's head comes up sharply. What man? Earlier, on the balcony, a man in a pale coat just standing there, watching the building. I thought I imagined it. She watches something move across his face, fast and grim, an entire recalibration happening behind his eyes in the space of a breath. That was him. That was almost certainly him. He is on his feet now, though he doesn't move toward the door, some careful discipline keeping him rooted in place beside her, rather than pulling her toward an exit she's already refused. He has never once, in a century, come this close without announcing himself first. If he is watching the building in person, rather than sending a proxy, it means he has decided the waiting is over. Why now? Why me? Because I have not let myself love anyone in 120 years, and he knows it. And I imagine he has spent every one of those years wondering what it would take to make me feel, even once, a fraction of what he believes I made his sister feel by refusing her. Theo crouches in front of her, finally, taking both her hands in his. Cold, always cold, a detail she stopped noticing except in moments like this one, when the coldness feels like part of the honesty, rather than separate from it. I am not going to make his mistake into yours. Whatever choice you make about your own life, about what you want it to become, it will be entirely yours, Rosa. I will not repeat with you the one decision I have never regretted, and Ignatius has never forgiven. That's a very serious way to propose staying together. And it comes out wobblier than she means it to, half a laugh braided through with something closer to tears. For a man who used his thumb as a hammer 4 days ago, I contain considerable contradiction. A ghost of the dry humor returns to his voice, brief and grateful for the excuse. Most of it, apparently, extremely old griefs. I'm sorry you're inheriting one of them on a Wednesday. I'm not going anywhere because of a flower and a sad story, Theo. I need you to understand that before we go any further. I'm scared, and I have about 400 more questions, but I'm not leaving. She turns her hands over in his, lacing their fingers together with a steadiness that surprises them both. What happens now? He doesn't answer right away. Instead, his phone, silent until now on the arm of the couch, lights up once. A single message, no name attached. The number blocked in a way that suggests whoever sent it took some care to make sure it stayed that way. Theo picks it up slowly, and Rosa watches whatever color is left in his face go carefully, deliberately still as he reads it. What does it say? He turns the screen toward her without a word. 4 sentences, typed plainly. No threats dressed up as anything but exactly what they are. He knows where she lives now. He knows what Theo has built since the tower. He will be waiting at the one place in the city Theo has never let himself pretend was safe from an old grief. His own glass rooftop at the turn of the new moon, 3 nights from now. And he expects, this time, for Theo to make a different choice than the one he made in 1904. 3 nights, Rosa says quietly. 3 nights. Theo sets the phone down with the exaggerated care of a man handling something that might otherwise shatter in his grip. Why the new moon? Is that real, or is he just being theatrical? Both, unfortunately. My kind draw a measure of strength from moonlight, the way certain plants draw it from the sun. Not dependence, exactly. More like a tide that helps or hinders depending on which way it's running. On the night of the new moon, with no light at all to draw from, I am weaker than I am on any other night of the month. It is not incapacitating. It is simply the one night in every 28 where the man across from me stops being at a permanent disadvantage. Ignatius has clearly done his research. He always does. He calls Dorian before the sentence has fully finished landing, the phone against his ear for less time than it takes most people to leave a voicemail. And the exchange that follows is quiet, clipped, entirely without the warmth Rosa has come to associate with the older man's voice even secondhand. A conversation between 2 people who have planned for this exact night more than once before and are relieved, in some grim, practical way, to finally be executing the plan instead of merely holding it in reserve. He'll begin preparing the rooftop tomorrow, Theo says, setting the phone down. There are precautions we can take. Wards Dorian's family has maintained on the building for 3 generations. Allies I can call who owe me debts old enough that they've stopped resenting the collecting of them. None of it makes Ignatius less dangerous. All of it improves the odds. Rosa sits with that for a long moment, turning it over the way she turns over a flawed drawing before she knows which line to fix first. What happens to Isolde's story if I choose differently than she did? The question comes out smaller than she means it to. Honest in the unrehearsed way that only comes out of a person too tired to perform composure anymore. What if I decide someday that I want what she didn't want? Does that undo anything for you? Does it fix something? Or does it just repeat it, with different names? I don't know. Plainly, without the reflexive reassurance she half expects, and something in the honesty of the admission lands harder than a comforting lie would have. I have spent 120 years telling myself I would never again let anyone's choice about their own mortality become a referendum on how well I loved them. I am not going to start now, 3 nights before a man who has spent his whole life failing to understand exactly that arrives at my door, expecting me to have learned nothing. Whatever you choose, Rosa, whenever you choose it, if you choose it at all, it will not be measured against her. You are not required to resolve my grief for me. You are only required to decide eventually what you want your own life to look like. That is the whole of it. I promise you that is the whole of it. She nods slowly and doesn't answer beyond that, because some questions deserve to sit unresolved a little longer before they're pushed toward any kind of shape, and because outside her window, 3 floors below the bakery awning where a man in a pale coat stood an hour ago. The city keeps moving, indifferent and human and entirely unaware that somewhere above it, a clock that has been ticking for 120 years has just been given an exact date to finish counting down to. The night before is quiet, in a way that frightens her more than any of the loud things have. Theo comes to her apartment at 10, as he has every night for a week, but there is a stillness in him tonight that has nothing to do with what he is, and everything to do with what tomorrow might cost, and she recognizes it because she has spent the day carrying the same weight in a different shape. They don't talk about Ignatius. They don't talk about wards or allies or the particular vulnerability of a new moon. Instead, he draws her toward the drawings. The restoration plans she's been quietly perfecting for 8 months. The ones she keeps rolled in a tube she carries like other people carry umbrellas, prepared for a weather that hasn't arrived yet. And she spreads them across her drafting table under the one good lamp. And for an hour, just an hour, they are simply 2 people who love the same building for different reasons, arguing gently about cornices. You've been guessing at the 3rd floor, tracing a line on the plan with one finger that doesn't quite touch the paper. The original layout. You've drawn what makes structural sense, and it's clever, and it's wrong. How would you know that? He doesn't answer with words. Instead, he rises, crosses to the coat he left over her chair, and produces from an inner pocket something folded so many times over so many decades that the creases have become part of the material itself. A sheet of paper gone the soft brown of very old things, brittle at the edges, and when he opens it flat on the table beside her modern drawings, she understands, before a single word passes between them, exactly what she's looking at. I drew this in 1871. The year before, I stopped needing to draw anything by candlelight to see it clearly. I wanted to be an architect before all of this. I never got the chance to finish the training. There were other plans made for me that year, plans I didn't choose. But I drew the building as I imagined it might be, if anyone ever cared enough to build it the way I saw it. 16 years later, someone did. I bought this tower, eventually, for reasons I told myself were financial, and only admitted much later that I'd simply wanted to stand inside a drawing I'd made when I still believed I might grow old. Her hands are careful with the paper, the way she is careful with anything a century has made fragile. The lines are unmistakably his, the same precision she's watched him bring to everything, and beneath them, in a hand gone shaky with age at the very bottom corner, a small note in Latin she doesn't recognize. What does it say? What is built with care outlives the hand that built it. I wrote it at 19, thinking it was about architecture. Something moves across his face, old and unguarded. I understand it rather differently now. Theo, I want you to have it. Plainly, without ceremony, which somehow makes it land harder than ceremony would have. Not as a gift for tonight, and not as anything final, whatever tomorrow becomes. I want you to have it because you are the first person in 155 years who has looked at that building and seen what I saw when I drew it. Not a monument to what I've built since, but a thing worth caring for on its own terms. If something happens tomorrow that I can't undo, I want the building finished the way it was meant to be finished. Not by me, by you, whatever else changes. She doesn't cry, though it's a near thing, and instead she does the only thing that feels equal to what he's just handed her. She takes his oldest drawing and lays it directly beside her newest one, corner to corner, a century and a half between them, meeting on the same table under the same lamp, and says, "Then help me get the third floor right. Tonight. Not because tomorrow needs it, because I want to know how you saw it before anyone told you it couldn't be built." They work until well past midnight, an old sketch and a new one slowly becoming a single plan. And if either of them notices that neither has said the word goodbye, that both of them have, without discussing it, simply refused to let the night carry that particular shape, neither says so out loud. The rooftop, when they arrive the following evening, is already occupied. Ignatius Cole stands at the far edge of the glass expanse with his back to the city, unhurried, dressed exactly as Rosa remembers from the bakery awning. And there is nothing about his posture that suggests a man in any rush at all. Only the terrible patience of someone who has waited 120 years and intends to enjoy every remaining minute of the wait, now that its end is finally in sight. "You brought her." His voice, when it comes, is almost gentle, which is somehow worse than any threat would have been. "I confess I hoped you might. It would have felt incomplete, doing this without a witness who understood exactly what it cost the last time. Let her go back downstairs, Ignatius. Whatever you intend for me, it does not require her presence. Doesn't it?" Cole's eyes move to Rosa, unhurried, assessing, and something in his gaze makes her understand. Viscerally, immediately, precisely how old and how tired the grief behind it has become. I have spent 120 years imagining this conversation. In every version, he loses something he cannot bear to lose, the way I lost her. I find I would rather you watch than simply be told about it afterward, the way I was told about my sister's death by a messenger too cowardly to look me in the eye while he explained why the man who claimed to love her let her die anyway. He didn't let her die. Rosa's voice comes out steadier than she expects it to, steady enough to surprise even her, and she steps forward before Theo's hand can close around her arm to stop her. "He told me the whole story last night, Ignatius. All of it. She asked him not to change her, over and over, for 11 years, and he respected that, even when it cost him everything, and even when it cost you the sister you wanted to keep. That's not cowardice. I've known a lot of men who couldn't manage that kind of restraint over 11 minutes, let alone 11 years. You know nothing about what she wanted at the very end. You weren't there. Neither were you, not really. Not as the version of yourself that could have made that choice for her without becoming exactly the kind of man you've spent a century turning yourself into instead." She holds his gaze, refusing to let the fear in her chest translate into anything she lets him see. He gave her the one thing you never learned how to give anyone, a choice. You've spent 120 years punishing him for loving her enough to let her decide, and I think some part of you has always known that if he'd done what you begged him to do, if he'd taken it from her, you'd have hated him twice as much, because then he'd have made her into something she explicitly said she didn't want to be, and you'd have had to live with knowing you're the reason she never got to choose. For a long moment, nothing on the rooftop moves. Somewhere below, traffic hums on into the ordinary hours of the night, indifferent to the argument being settled 40 stories above it, and Ignatius Cole stands very still, something working behind his eyes that looks less like fury now and more like a man confronted, after a very long avoidance, with the exact shape of the thing he's been running from. She would have hated this. Quietly, almost to himself. Everything I've built my life around since. She would have hated every version of what I became to get here. I think she would have, Theo says, gently. No triumph in it at all. Only something that might, in another century, have passed for compassion between them. I think she loved you exactly as you were, Ignatius, before any of this, before the hunger, before the decades of patience spent on the wrong project. I have missed you as much as I have missed her. I want you to know that, whatever happens tonight. I never stopped grieving both of you at once. Cole's hands, which had curled into something ready for violence the moment they arrived, slowly, visibly, unclench. He looks at Theo for a long moment, and then at Rosa, and something in his face, old, exhausted, finally undefended, breaks in a way that has nothing to do with the fight either of them had braced for. I don't know how to stop. The most honest thing he said all night. I have been this for so long I don't remember the shape of anything else. Then don't stop tonight, Theo says. Start tomorrow instead. There is no version of vengeance that gives you back a single hour of her, Ignatius. There never was. I would rather have my brother back than my enemy gone. That offer has stood for 120 years. It stands tonight, too, if you'll take it. Nothing resolves cleanly, the way stories sometimes promise it will. Cole doesn't embrace him, doesn't weep, doesn't transform in a single rooftop conversation into the boy he was before grief calcified into purpose. He simply turns eventually toward the edge of the roof and pauses there long enough to say, without looking back, I need time. I am not promising anything beyond that. And then he is gone, over the edge and into the dark, with a speed that leaves no proof he was ever there at all, beyond the faint impression of boots in the frost along the parapet. Rosa lets out a breath she has apparently been holding since the elevator, and Theo turns to her, and for a long moment neither of them says anything, because some silences are their own kind of relief. You could have been killed. So could you. Every night for 8 months, probably, in ways I never noticed. She takes his hand, lacing their fingers together the way she has learned, this past week, is the fastest route back to steady ground for both of them. I'm not sorry I said what I said. He needed someone to say it who wasn't you. It couldn't come from you. He'd have heard it as another apology he didn't want. You are, without question, the most alarming woman I have met in 185 years. The highest compliment he has. Because it is. I would like to ask you something, and I would like you to take whatever time you need to answer it honestly, without worrying about my grief, or Isolde's ghost, or anything else that isn't simply what you want for your own life. Ask me, do you want this? Immortality. Me, for as long as either of us can imagine that lasting. I am not asking you to answer tonight. I am asking you to know that the question exists, and that whenever you're ready to answer it, I will still be here. She thinks about it. Really thinks, standing on a rooftop 40 stories above a city that has no idea how close it came tonight, to losing nothing at all because 2 people finally told each other the truth in time. And what finally comes isn't the answer either of them expected her to arrive at quite so soon, but it is, unmistakably, hers. No. Gently, watching something brace in him before she finishes. Not because I don't love you. I do. More than I know what to do with yet. But I want to grow old, Theo. I want the whole ordinary, indignant, finite thing. Wrinkles and bad knees and running out of time to finish every drawing I start. I want it because it's mine, the way Isolde wanted hers. And I think the kindest thing either of us can do with what we learned tonight is let that be enough. I want to spend however many years I get with you, exactly as I am. And when they're over, I want you to have loved someone who chose that on purpose, the same way you loved her for choosing it too. Theo is quiet for a long moment, and when he finally speaks, his voice has gone rough in a way it hasn't. Not once, in all the worst hours of the last 4 days. Then that is what we will have, all of it, however much of it there is. Below them, the city keeps turning, entirely unaware of the ordinary, extraordinary thing just decided on a rooftop it will never know existed. And 40 stories up, in the last hour before dawn, An old drawing and a new one sit side by side on a drafting table across town, waiting, unhurried, for two people to come back and finish what they'd started. Some love stories are built on the promise of forever. This one was built on something rarer. Two people who looked straight at how little time they might actually get, and chose each other anyway, eyes open, nothing hidden. Theo spent a century and a half learning that love without consent isn't love at all. Rosa spent one impossible week learning that choosing an ordinary life on purpose can be its own kind of extraordinary. Neither of them got a guarantee. They got something better, the truth, freely given, and a choice that was entirely their own. If this story found its way into your chest the way it found its way into ours, let us know. Hit like if Theo's letter desk confession lived rent-free in your head for even a minute. Drop a comment telling us which moment hit hardest. The rooftop, the old drawing, or the 4 words that started it all. And subscribe if you want more nights like this one, because Lanterns of Love isn't done lighting them yet.